Okay. So I'm going to read from verse 8 to verse 10, I guess. And then I guess 11 is another theme. Okay. And on this night, they shall eat the flesh of the Pesach offering, roasted over the fire. We talked about this, that roasted over the fire means not what we call roast. What we call roast would be really considered cooking because we put it in a pot. If it's in a pot, it means it's cooking in either liquid or its own juices. So when the Torah says tzliesh, it has to be roasted by the fire. It means like what would we call grilled, I guess. And unleavened cakes, which is matzah, with bitter herbs, they shall eat it. So here's the root of, I guess it's a sandwich. You have matzah, you have bread, you have bitter herbs, and you have the meat. And then the Torah reiterates, you shall not eat it rare or boiled in water, except roasted over the fire, its head, with its legs, and with its innards. In other words, they would put the whole animal on the grill all at once. And
So
then
this
this
is like a souvlaki sandwich.
yeah. It's pretty good. Today, like I said, we talked about this, that we're missing the main ingredients. So what can you do? You don't have the meat. But okay. And then you have this is a common thread with all the offerings, is verse 10. We read about this many times in the third book of the Torah, which we began reading today, Leviticus. You shall not leave over any of it until morning, and whatever is left over it until morning, you shall burn in fire. That's no tar. This is specific law. Every offering has a prescribed time in which it must be consumed, and if it passes that time, it has to be burnt. It happens to be that the Pesach offering is the one with the shortest time. You have to eat it in one night. It's a debate if till midnight. But either way, once the morning comes, anything left over to the morning has to be burnt. Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Tamron, please.
Rabbi, let me ask you a question that maybe you've answered before, and Vicky and Ben, forgive me if it's obvious. Is the word for commandment in Hebrew something that has closer to do with love than obligation?
Okay, so that's a good point. What we say mitzvah, we say commandments. Um, the Hebrew is a tricky language because it's a many fewer words than certainly than English and maybe even other languages. So in Hebrew, there happens to be that there are many roots that seem to be completely unrelated in English, but in Hebrew are all the same. In other words, one word can include multiple meanings. And that is a fascinating genre of study because you could see concepts that in other languages are unrelated, but in Hebrew, they are related. And that's a whole insight to the philosophy of Judaism, because language captures culture, captures philosophy of that specific culture. So this is an example. How do you say commandment in Hebrew? Commandment is tzav, tzivui, mitzvah. It means commandments. And in that sense, commandment is the accurate translation. And I once had a rabbi, I don't mean to put down other educational systems or denominations, but I once had a rabbi who said you can walk into a Jewish school and you could learn about the religious philosophy of that school with just asking one question. Just one question, that's all you have to ask. Stop any kid in the first grade, and say, what is the translation of the word mitzvah? Now, usually you'll get one of two words. Usually you'll get either commandment, okay, or you may get good deed. Now, this rabbi says good deed is no good. Now, it happens to be that many mitzvot are good deeds. But good deed doesn't capture what a mitzvah is. Because think about this. If you tell someone do a good deed, who could disagree? Everyone wants to do a good deed. But the moment you say commandments, think about how many ideas you have to convey, what that commandment captures. If there's commandment, it means there's a commander. So there's a God. If there's a God, not only is there a God, but God communicates. Okay? So all of a sudden, that's a whole different philosophy than saying a good deed. A good deed doesn't tell you anything about the source of the good deed and what is good, etc. So I'm trying to say that mitzvah is the right commandment, is the right translation. Mitzvah means commandment. Okay. However, what you're saying is correct, that there could be more layers. And that's the Hasidic emphasis. The Hasidic emphasis is that if you look at that same word mitzvah, and if you look at other meanings of that same root, same word, but it has other meanings as well, it can also mean, tzavta means togetherness or connection. So mitzvah is commandment, but it's connection. Now, what's the connection? What's the connection between connection and commandment? We think of two different things. Commandments tell you what to do. So here the point is when we do a mitzvah, yes, God commands us to do it, and we do it because God told us to do it. We do it because we're supposed to do it. But what happens when we do it, and why are we doing it? The whole idea of this connection, of this commandment, is to create a connection to God, to create a relationship with God. And these, when someone says, you tell your kid, do me a favor, could you go get me a glass of water? I can get the glass of water myself. But the point is, now we have a connection. Now we have a bond. If you're doing something for me, all of a sudden we have a connection. We have a relationship. I need you. I'm vulnerable. You could tell me no. I'm exposing myself to rejection, right? So the idea of commandment as connection is not something that's superimposed on saying it also means connection, but the word itself of commandment also has the mean connection. And connection is obviously desire for relationship. And that would be love. That would be put in all the words. So what I'm trying to say is Hebrew, because it has fewer roots, you have these connections. If I stop you on the street and I say, do you think there's any connection between connection and commandment? You would say, what's one got to do with the others? Two separate, distinct roots. But in Hebrew, it's not distinct roots. It's the same roots.
Well, Rabbi,
It, it,
that's why I asked you the question, because
Yeah.
my feeling is if it feels like a burden and an obligation, there's going to be a natural resistance and reluctance to do it. If it feels like a connection and it's about love, I think it's going to be a much easier process to do because there's a human feeling. I mean, it has a whole different import if it feels like I'm doing it because I have to do it, or I'm doing it because it's
Yeah,
part of love.
I agree with you, but I would just say that I think it's broader than love. Love is one way of connection. There are other ways that I would say obviously it's motivated by love, but that's not what I feel right now. So,
Well,
for
keep
example, there's
going.
the idea of commitment,
Okay.
right? Commitment would be persons in a relationship. You read the movies, you say, okay, they live happily ever after, and everybody, I love the other person all the time. But the reality is that love is much more like a torch of fire. It goes up, it goes down. You don't always feel it. I hate to be the one to bear bad news. And sometimes, and sometimes we talked about this metaphor that the Zohar gives that a relationship needs two wings. It needs love and respect, or love and commitment. And like a bird, you can't expect love to do the relation to bear the relationship, just like you can't expect one wing to make the bird fly. So in other words, sometimes I say, you know what, I don't feel the love right now, but I did yesterday and I will tomorrow. And right now I'm very committed to you. And it's a different feel. Now it's
Hmm.
deep down, it's motivated by love. So I think that connection is a more overarching word. It could
Okay.
be love,
I've got
it
it.
could be commitment, it could be devotion, right? It could be all kinds of things, but love is certainly a very important component, no question about it. And that's why one of the most important mitzvot, the most general mitzvot, is love and I would say they translate it as fear. I would say love or respect, commitment. So these are the two wings. So
Thank
I
you.
think connection is more overarching, but I think love is
I
certainly important. Absolutely.
I think it's really fascinating what you said about that going in and asking, what does mitzvah mean?
Yeah.
Because if you look to Reform Judaism, which is what I grew up under, I think good deed is sort of what, and their whole concept of tikkun,
Right.
that you see there, which is it takes God out of it. It takes a commander out of it,
Right.
and which I think is really, really interesting.
And by the
That's
way, some mitzvot are good deeds. Some mitzvot are not good deeds. If you don't mix milk and meat, it's not a good deed. It's a chok. It's a decree. We do it for no other reason than God told us to do it. So some mitzvot are good deeds, and some mitzvot are just not good deeds. There was a funny story where we had a lecturer that came to speak at Chabad of Greenwich. I don't know if you'll find. I think it's funny. So he describes. I don't know why I'm saying this. It's just really funny. I think it's fun. I don't know if it's that funny. Once I set it up, it's not that
You're
funny.
always funny, Rabbi.
No, I just so he did so he says in the his kids in preschool in Boston. He teaches at Boston University. So his kids in a Jewish preschool in Boston, and they have this thing that in the morning they bring in a mitzvah note. Every kid is supposed to bring in a mitzvah note and say something that they did, and then they read it out loud in class. So he says, I come to see the mitzvah notes, and I see that the kids are giving mitzvah notes, but they're not mitzvah notes. Uh, my daughter ate the cereal for breakfast. It's not a mitzvah. It's not one of the 613 commandments. My daughter, I don't know, whatever it was. I don't want to get graphic. And went to the toilet. It's
She picked
wonderful.
up her she picked up her
Yeah,
clothes.
very close. She went to the
Made her
toilet.
bed.
She made
She
it
made
bad.
her bed.
It's not what it says in the commandments. So he says, you know what? I'm going to educate the school. I'm going to send a real mitzvah note. So then he sends in mitzvah in the book of Leviticus. For example, there's a mitzvah that you're not allowed to plow with an ox and a donkey together. It's a mitzvah. It's one of those decrees. You can't mix species. So he sends a mitzvah note to the teacher with his daughter to the school, and it says, "My daughter did a mitzvah. She did not plow her field with an ox and a donkey together." And that's a real mitzvah. That's legitimate. So then the teacher calls him and says, "You know what? I think you should have your wife write the mitzvah notes." So I know. So the point I'm trying to say is that some mitzvot are good deeds, and some mitzvot, I'm sure it's good to do what God wants, but I don't know that your average person would classify it as a good deed. It's a deed. We do it. So good deed is.
Rabbi, what you're highlighting is that mitzvah rather than obligation means connection.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm just saying, but it's only okay. Now you want to go a step further. I don't want to dilute the commandment meaning. This is a very important point. This is a very important point. Question is, and again, like I say, I always talk about this, that people have a lot of problems with, spiritual seekers especially have problems with Judaism, because Judaism is very much, this is the commandment, you have to do it, and you have to do it in this exact way. Whereas spiritual seekers are looking for spirituality, they're looking to transcend, they're looking to escape definition, generally speaking. So philosophically speaking, the question is, how can I connect to God? I cannot make that connection. I cannot decide that if I read this poetry, I feel closer to God. It's true, you feel closer to God. I feel closer to God. That's true. But me feeling closer to God doesn't make me closer to God, because there's a gap that's not bridgeable between the infinite and the finite. So, for example, let's say I say, when I go to the coffee shop, I feel closer to Ben. That's what happens. I feel closer. So I'm going to go to the coffee shop. It's a wonderful thing.
I'm going to go get coffee more. So
okay.
That's a good idea.
It's a wonderful thing. But what happens if you're not in the coffee shop? You happen to be, where are you? You're in the steakhouse. So I could feel close to you, but you're not there. It's not going to be a connection. So the philosophy is as follows. The only way we can really connect to God is following the path that he says. He says, if you do this, I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up at the library. But I say, what are you, library? I don't want to be at the library. I want to be at the coffee shop. At the coffee shop, I feel close to you. Yeah, but God is at the library. So in other words, the only way, the creation cannot create the terms of the bridge between the finite and the infinite, because the gap is unbridgeable. Only the infinite could say, if you do this exact way, if you eat this amount of matzah, and you don't eat it 2 weeks before, because the Passover night is not convenient, so you'll eat your Passover Seder 2 weeks before. I mean, it's okay, it's harmless, but that's not where God is. God is, if you do the mitzvah in the way it's commanded, that's basically God saying, here, I'm in the library at this time. You want to meet me? Come meet me. So connection is important, but commandment is important, because commandment means commander, and commandment means that we're doing the prescribed, we're following the means of connection that God lays out, and we cannot make that connection because we're finite, and the finite can't connect to the infinite. The infinite could connect to the finite because he's all powerful.
And going to what John said, the commandment is connecting to a way of life.
Yeah.
To being a good person, and in the large sense of that word. And that's
and I have nothing against good deeds. Many of the commandments are good deeds. And if you keep all the commandments, you're going to be a good person. Right? I'm just saying that the word good deed doesn't necessarily capture.
No, it's a way of life. It's a connection to God. It's a connect with or just to the rhythm of the world. I mean, I don't know what you want to say.
Indeed. Okay, what I want to do now is I want to talk a little bit about the bitter herbs and the matzah and the Passover offering. And this, I'll make a confession right now. What I'm saying now is not new. I say it every single year, multiple times, especially before Passover. But because this is a very important meditation, and we're eating, and it's the biggest, the mitzvah on Passover is to eat matzah and bitter herbs. So I talk about this every year. It's also important to say that there's a law that started with Moses. Moses established that people should study the laws of the holiday 30 days before the holiday. And the Hasidim add that it's not just study the law and know what to do, but it's also spiritual preparation. You want to feel, if you really want to get the best experience of your Passover Seder, you can't just show up. I mean, you could. It's the mitzvah is just to show up and eat the matzah. But if you want to get the full experience, it's like if I show up, imagine I show up to a classical music concert. I didn't prepare. I don't know one note from another note. So I'm sure it'll be an uplifting experience, but I'm not going to get the full experience as if I'm preparing. If I prepared and I study about the music, or I go to a museum, I show up, the first time I see an artist, okay, I'm sure you'll have an uplifting experience. But the more you prepare and the more you do the background work, the more you'll be able to gain from the experience. So the Hasidim say it's not just that we're supposed to learn the laws of Passover to get a refresher, but it's also prepare spiritually and think about the messages and the meditations of Passover. And then when you come to the Passover Seder, you already have preparation, and then you'll be able to internalize the great energy of the night, because the energy is available anyway. But the internalization, it happens through preparation. It's like the metaphor would be that when it rains, it helps the produce. But if you plow and you plant, then the rain could help. But if you don't plow and you don't plant, yeah, the rain will do something. It's going to soften the earth. It's going to do a little bit. It's going to do something, but it's not going to be internalized as if I did the preparation. So therefore, I feel very good that we're 2.5 weeks before Passover, and we're going to talk about a little bit the idea of the matzah. Now the question is, so what does this matzah represent? So there are many layers that we can talk about what it represents. Let's start with the most basic layer. There's nothing too spiritual. Just as simple as straightforward as possible. The Torah wants us to experience freedom. Freedom is associated with luxury because slaves do not have luxury. So one way to read the story is the Torah simply wants you to have a luxurious sandwich. What is a luxurious sandwich? It needs meat. It needs a wrap. By the way, the matzahs then were not matzahs like today. It was much more like a wrap. If you come to the Monday Lunch and Learn, you'll see that we get meat wraps. They're very good. And it has to have bitter herbs. Why? Because that's considered luxury, right? You know, the Ben knows because sometimes we forget to bring the mustard to the Lunch and Learn. That's a problem. Mustard is bitter. What do you want bitter? No, but you can't have meat without mustard, right? So and by the way, that's why you have to have roast. Why roast? Because that's the way it's luxury. And by the way, that's why you have to burn the leftovers right away, because people who live in luxury don't eat leftovers. When I was growing up, every Sunday night, what was for supper Sunday night? Leftovers from Shabbat. So leftovers you have on Sunday night. But people who live in luxury, they don't do leftovers. So all these commandments could be read on a very simple level. That everything the Torah told you, Torah says, eat it with bitter herbs and eat it roast, and don't cook it because roast tastes better than cooking, and barbecue and grilled is better than cooking, tastes better. And you need bitter herbs, you need your mustard. And you want to eat it fresh. Don't eat it tomorrow. Don't save, by the way, also don't save for tomorrow. You save for tomorrow, poor person. I go to the restaurant, I say, pack some to go because I may need lunch tomorrow, right? But if you're living in luxury, you don't have to worry about tomorrow. The chef is going to cook up something fresh tomorrow. So all these mitzvot represent the idea of luxury. And this is the beautiful thing is that they're living in a mind frame of luxury even when they're still enslaved. You see, once Hashem releases you, it makes sense to have a Seder. But here they have a Seder even before they left Egypt. So they're technically still slaves, but God is telling you that freedom and luxury is a mind frame. And if you, in your mind, and you live the life of freedom, you will be free. So it's a lot more within your head. We talked about this on Monday as well. With this past Monday, we did a Lunch and Learn about the idea of how the sages shift the focus from actual actual destruction of the chametz from your home to more of conceptual destruction of chametz. So you can nullify the chametz because they understand that the idea of freedom is a lot of it is in the head. A lot of it is in the perception. So this is a beautiful concept that if you're talking about people they're poor, completely poor, and they're enslaved, and they have no luxury, and slavery is the opposite of luxury, and yet God says, when you're still in Egypt, not when you leave it's easy. When you get to Israel and you have independence and you have wealth, that's easy to be free, easy to be in luxury. But could you be in a mind frame of luxury even in Egypt? Then we know you're really free. So I think that's very profound. But on a basic level, that's what the sandwich represents. Sandwich represents you want to be in a state of luxury and you want to be in a state of Cherut, freedom, because freedom and luxury are usually connected. I'm not going to say every person who's free has luxury, but I would say every person who's enslaved does not have luxury. So in a way, there's a correlation. There could be a correlation. Many times there is a correlation between freedom and luxury. The free people would recline in the times of the Mishnah and Roman times. So that's why we also supposed to recline when we eat the Passover Seder. So there's this theme of freedom and luxury that these verses are trying to evoke and trying to create the experience of freedom and luxury. So that we'll stop here. We don't have to get to any philosophy or theology, but that's true. This could be true, but there's also we can go beneath and say there are multiple layers to the sandwich, and this is just one layer, but there are more layers. But I do think to me this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want you to repeat your Monday lunch and learn, so I wasn't able to attend. But when you say destroying the chametz in your head, that's kind of an interesting concept to me. What does that mean?
Oh, so I'll be brief but this is important. The Torah says on the seventh day, we'll read it later in this chapter. On the seventh day, you should. Let's see how the ArtScroll translates it. If you look at page 355 in the ArtScroll, it says like this. Oh, but on the previous day you shall nullify the leaven from your homes. That's a rabbinic translation. It doesn't mean nullify. It's a funny word, which we'll get to in a second. I'm going to share the screen and see in verse 15. Here it says like this: For 7 days you shall eat unleavened cakes, but on the preceding day you shall clear away all leaven from your houses. Okay, so it's the Hebrew word is tashbitu. Tashbitu is an interesting word. It comes from the word Shabbat, which means stop or rest. In other words, 7 days, make the chametz stop from your house. What does that mean? So what it means is get rid of all the bread from your house. And that's the way it was practiced for always. You remove all the chametz from your house. Once you get to the rabbinic writings say 1 second. In the Mishnah, it talks about this idea. What happens if you're walking to, it's the day before Passover, and you're going to do a mitzvah, you're going to a wedding, or you're going to a circumcision, or you're going to do something, and you realize, I have some chametz in my house. If I go home to destroy the chametz, I won't be able to do this mitzvah. If I do this mitzvah, I have chametz in my home. What do I do? So the Mishnah says, very simple, nullify it in your heart, which is basically saying, in your mind, say, this is not important. I don't really need this. I don't really care about this. And then you get to that's the Mishnah. Then you get to Talmud, and Talmud says, you know what? And that's what we do practice today. Even if you're going to rid your house of chametz the night before and the day, depending who you follow, we do both. You declare the statement. Say, any chametz that I have in my house that I have in my possession is insignificant and to be considered like dust. And the commentaries say, the Talmud says, biblically speaking, that's enough. If you make this statement and you say, this is now meaningless to me, it is, then you don't violate the commandment of chametz because you nullified it. Now, it happens to be, we also are supposed to rid the chametz of our home. Why? So the rabbis say, why not? If you could just nullify it in your heart, why isn't that enough? So there's all kinds of reasons. One reason is you may wake up in the morning, forget it's Passover, you have the Danish on the table, you'll eat it. So nullification, you may forget. Also, if I say it's nullified, is it really nullified? Maybe yeah, maybe no. So we actually remove it from our house. But we do say the statement, and if you say the statement, you're protected against the biblical. You kept the biblical commandment of ridding your house of chametz. Because what is chametz? What is chametz is tangible. In other words, chametz is real, but your perception is key. And what is meaningful? What matters? I said on Monday, somebody called me and somebody said something not nice to me. Okay, fine. I determine how much that matters, not the other person. It's my perception. And freedom is a way of letting go of taking my own destiny in my hands and I say, I decide what's meaningful in my life, not society, not other people. And yes, usually a piece of pizza is very significant, but for this week, a piece of pizza is not significant. It's meaningless. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything to me. That's an exercise of taking control of what is significant to me in my life. And by the way, there's no other ways to freedom. There's no shortcuts to freedom because you can be a free person, but if society or technology or anything else determines your life and how you perceive yourself, you're going to be enslaved because other people determine how you value yourself and how you value your life and how you spend your time. So freedom is the ability to say, I determine what's significant. I determine what bothers me. I determine if it's a good day or not. Nobody else. But what do you mean? Something really happened today. I crashed my car. Okay, it's up to me how significant that is. So this idea, this rabbinic teaching that the Torah says, it doesn't say in the Torah, remove the chametz from your house. The Torah knows Hebrew. That's not what it says. It says, make it stop. How do you make it stop? So it could be a tangible thing, or it could also be a perception. And the rabbis are saying that the perception is key. And the perception is key to fulfilling the laws of. So we do both. Like I said, we do both. We also say it's nullified in our mind. We also rid of it in our house. We also do something else, which we sell the chametz, which is a separate discussion. I don't want to get into it right now. But the bottom line is the idea that freedom is determined internally. I decide, and chametz is the opposite of freedom. On these 7 days, chametz or 8 days, chametz represents the problem. I decide whether the problem is significant or not. Nobody else decides. How meaningful is this problem? It's in my hands. And if I have that attitude, I understood what freedom is. And this is the beautiful thing. I'm still in Egypt. Why are you eating luxury? Why are you eating a sandwich like the wealthy, free people if you're still enslaved? Because God told me tomorrow I'm going to be free, but it didn't happen yet. So you don't have to wait for the circumstances to align. You could live in your mind. You could live in a state of freedom. Right? So there's a wealth and there's the wealth mindset. And people don't have to be wealthy to have a wealth mindset. And people could be wealthy and not have a wealth mindset.
This book on forgiveness that just came out
has
the same concept though of forgiveness is in your head in many ways, and don't let other people write your story. You have to put that out there that's if you're letting someone else write your story, then you're guilt ridden, you're down, but if you can forgive, which is really forgiving yourself as much as it is forgiving the other, then that's how you're going to get to freedom. That's how you're going to relieve the two are so intertwined.
Yes.
It's in the concept of, I never realized how that relates, how really a central core of Judaism.
Yeah. And that's freedom, but it's even more general than that. It's the basic of, today psychology understands the importance of self-esteem. Now the question is, does self-esteem come from external sources? It comes from myself. Does it come from somebody told me I'm a good guy or I do something nice? We discussed this with the doctor when we did the course. If I keep doing this, then I constantly need validation from the world outside of me. I'm enslaved to validation, and I need more clicks, and I need more likes, and I need more reviews. And if nobody told me today that I'm a good guy, the foundation of my self-esteem is shaken. But that's because I'm outsourcing my sense of worth to what other people or society as a whole, to what other people value or what society values. But if I control the perception, I don't outsource my self-perception to other people. And I say, I'm valuable because God sees the value in me and because I see the value in self, then I'm truly free. And I'm not going to follow all the whims of society where I have to fit in to do what everyone else is doing. So I should have value. So this is a very important point. This concept of understanding that freedom is not just, it's also external circumstances, but even before that, before you actually go to the Seder, before you're free, you have to act free. And you have to perceive yourself as free and say, I'm a person entitled to a roast sandwich with mustard, even though my external circumstances may be enslaved. So that's very powerful. Okay, the next step we could talk about the sandwich is you can talk about it in theological terms or psychological terms. We only have 13 minutes, but I think we're a bright group. We can do 13 minutes. We can do both of those perspectives, both the theological and the psychological. So one of the themes that some of the commentaries, the Maharal of Prague and others talk about, is that a very important principle in Judaism is the concept of unity. And the Shema, the most important declaration of Judaism is Hashem Echad, God is one. And if you look at the Mishnah, Tractate Brachot, there's a very important concept that says a person must thank God for the bad, just like you thank God for the good. And that's a very powerful statement because we're not saying bad is good and good is bad. It's two distinct things. In fact, they're two distinct blessings. When something good happens, you say, blessed is the Lord, Hatov HaMeitiv, who is good and does good. And when something bad happens, you don't say, thank God for doing something good because it's not good, it's bad. But you still says you have to thank God for the bad. So there's a separate blessing which says, Dayan Ha'emet, blessed are you, Lord, the true judge. And we do that if a close relative passes away, but also in the times of the Mishnah, something bad happens, you lose some money, you could say that blessing too. Now, what do you mean when you say God is the true judge? Essentially what you're saying is, I don't agree with your judgment. I don't think this is a good idea. Because I say, you're the true judge. I wouldn't judge it that way. In my estimation, this was bad. But you know what? You're God, you probably know more than I know. But when something good happens, I say, thank you, God, for doing good. So we're not blurring the lines between good and evil, good and bad. There are things that happen to me that are good, that I perceive as good, and there are things that happen to me that I perceive as bad. And therefore we have a distinct blessing. Nevertheless, a theological principle in Judaism would be that both come from Hashem and both have a reason. Both have a reason. Even the negativity that happens in the world is for a reason. Now, sometimes we understand the reason. Sometimes we don't understand the reason. But we believe that there is a reason. We accept it on faith. Now, many people understand that this is in some ways the most important principle of Judaism, because if you think about this, you look at other faiths, and even today, I don't know to what degree, I'm not an expert in other religions, but it's very common for other faiths to say that, let's say, for example, something else bad happens in the world. Let's say there's a natural disaster. Let's say there's a war. Let's say there's negativity. What do they say? They don't have a problem. They say, it's no problem. That's Satan. So God is on vacation. God is asleep. God was out in Disney World. So when God was asleep, Satan grabbed control of the levers, and now there's a tsunami. And that's very convenient because you shield God from all the negativity in the world. And we understand that every believing person has this problem of, why do bad things happen to good people? And how does God allow for suffering? This is not a new problem from the 21st century or the 20th century. It's not a new problem that's a result of the Enlightenment. Moshe is asking this question. Abraham is asking this question. Every believing person has to ask that question. So one way to shield God from this question is to say, God is not responsible for the bad. The bad happens because of Satan. Don't blame God. And there'll be a dichotomy of there's two powers. There's a power of the good and the power of the evil. And many pagans certainly said it, and even quote unquote allegedly monotheistic faiths also say it. But Judaism, we're allergic to that. We can't say that because what that means is there's two gods. That means there's a power other than God. And if there's a power other than God, then God is not the only power. So maybe there's one God who's very big and another God / Satan who's very small. Doesn't matter. That's two gods. There's no unity. And the premise of Judaism is there's one God. There's only one power. So we have to, therefore, we cannot say there are two gods. So we cannot shield God of the negativity. We say negativity also happens because of God. Now, why does that happen? So we don't always know, but we believe it's for a purpose. And that's a premise of the faith. Now, you talk about the Jews in Egypt who suffered for 200 years, or at least 80 years. They were in Egypt for 210 years, but then slowly it devolved into slavery. They were in the intense slavery for 86 years. And they suffered tremendously. And now Moshe comes and says, oh, freedom, God took us out. What's the obvious question? Where was God till now? How does God allow for the suffering? Okay? What's the answer? What's the theological answer? We'll talk about the psychological answer in a second. But what's the theological answer? Theological answer is, like Jews, everything has to be set through food. The theological answer is the sandwich. You have mustard and you have meat. And if you didn't have the mustard, the meat wouldn't taste good. And if you wouldn't have the meat, the mustard wouldn't taste good. The idea that opposites can create a sandwich, that opposites create a larger story, that if you look at every component in itself, you're not going to get the full picture. You have to look at the full component, the full story. So in other words, the sandwich represents the unity between every aspect of God, what we would call God's kindness and God's judgments, or the positive and the negative, or the good and the evil. But both are part of a greater truth and a greater story, and both have a purpose. And that's the theological point. Now we go to the psychological point. A person could go through a difficulty in their life, and say this was a bad part of I look for the past 40 years of my life, or 50 or 60 or 100, doesn't matter, and say this was the bad part of my life, this was the good part of my life. The problem with doing that is it's like the guy who says, why do I need a sandwich? I'll take one bite into the pastrami and one bite into the mustard. That's not good. Then the pastrami doesn't taste good and the mustard doesn't taste good. You have to realize that the challenge in my life, that itself was part of the person I became. And I would not become the person I became if not for that challenge. And I would not have learned what I've learned if not for this challenge. And I would not have developed, and I would not have to search deep within myself and find the resources to overcome if I did not have that challenge. So from that perspective, the true growth happens when I realize that there is a challenge and there is difficulty. There are bitter moments and there are joyful moments, but they're not distinct. They're part of one sandwich. And that is, go ahead.
Carrying that metaphor, I was thinking, okay, the bitter and the bitter and the meat on the meat. So the French, they make mustard, the fields, some Dijon fields and all, and steak is often served that way. But then I was thinking about Japanese food, where you use the teriyakis and whatever, where they take meat and they make it sweet. The teriyaki sweet, sauces are sweet, and so there you have the meat with the sweet, and all. Yeah. And if you think of maybe like Szechuan food in China, you have the meat with the hot, and all. So they're not, but we do the bitter and this and there. I don't know. I've never thought of it before, but it does seem like that there's interesting differences between cultures about what they mix meat with.
Right. But what's interesting here, specifically here, it's not just this is what they call, sometimes cuisine is also affected by what is available, right? What is available. So, but here, so you could say it's by chance. Here, this is a religious statement. This is regulated how you eat it. And if you eat it without the bitter herbs, you did not fulfill the commandment. So, and you don't have to eat this way the whole year, but on Passover night you do. So it's very clear that this is not, let's just go to the grocery, and because we want to eat local, we'll find the local ingredients and we'll put together a nice sandwich. And if we were living in Japan, the ingredients would be different because there was no mustard available or whatever it is, and they have a different tradition. It's clear that this is an educational and spiritual messaging here. And that's why we don't necessarily eat this way all year. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but it's not regulated. On this night, and it's, by the way, it's the only night you have to do this when it comes to eating other offerings, which we do. Other offerings are also eaten on holidays, or different types of offerings are eaten. That's all about in the third book, which we start reading today. But none of them have this level of regulation. You don't have to eat bitter herbs, and you don't have to eat matzah. So it's clear that this thing. That's what I'm trying to say. That this teaching is. This is the founding event of our peoplehood. So the messaging has to be overarching. This is now a message about this. This is a general message about the biggest problem of all is finding the unity philosophically, theologically, but also psychologically in my own personal life. And I don't think there is a teaching. I don't think if you have to have one symbol that would capture the most important principle in Judaism, I don't think that you can find a better one than the unity. Both the good and the bad have a singular purpose. There's a singularity in the world that we say when we say the Shema, Hashem Echad, God is one. And there's nothing in the world that escapes the overarching story. Even the negative is here for the positive to have to overcome and dig deeper within itself and develop itself to the point where it can overcome the negative. So the negative is actually the arena where the positive becomes stronger. It's like going to the gym and they give you resistance. So you could look at the resistance and say the resistance is here to break me. And you could say, no, the resistance is making you stronger. So that's true from the philosophical point. They both come from Hashem, but also from the experiential point, or I'll call it the psychological perspective. We also have, how do I choose to live my life? How do I look at a hardship? How do I look at a rejection, et cetera, et cetera? So I don't think there's anything that could be a more important message than this. And of course, Jews, everything we do is through food. So it's expressed through a tuna sandwich. Now, a tuna sandwich, a matzah sandwich. Now we have to talk about an interesting thing that nowadays we don't really have a full sandwich. We can negotiate about this. Maybe next week we'll do that. But I think this is, we have to digest, quote unquote, pun intended. We have to digest this before we get to the next point. Go ahead, Dr. Tamarin.
Rabbi, with someone who's truly elevated, like the Rebbe, when something bad happens to him, and I'm sure many bad things have happened to him,
yes,
does he actually thank God?
you have to thank God. Yes, everyone does. In other words, and that's the practice. At a funeral, you tear your garments and you say, "Blessed are you, Lord, the true judge, true judge." You're not saying it's good. If it was good, you wouldn't tear your garments, right? That's the paradox here. I'm saying it's bad. From my perspective, it's bad, but it's part of there's purpose. Both the good and the bad have purpose. This is mustard. This is bitter. Now, I may not be able to see how it's part of the sandwich, but on faith, I believe that it's part of a sandwich. The short answer is yes, we do both. We thank God, and not just the Rebbe. That's the code of law. That's basic Jewish practice. So we're not saying it's good. Don't get me wrong. We're not some Eastern faith trying to say everything is good. We're not saying everything is good. There's good and there's bad. But that's the whole point. Both the good and the bad come from the same source.
Excuse me, but I have to go. So
thank you, John, for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Vicky, please.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. This is a powerful metaphor about the sandwich, but I was just wondering the role of matzah. So the matzah is neutral, kind of, because it's tasteless. So does it represent something that the energy that it's neutral and it's in our power to turn it either way? So today we're slaves and tomorrow we're free.
That's one way to think about it. There are other ways to think about it. I'm just going to be brief because the kids are going to come in here a second. In a way, the matzah is neutral, and the way the matzah is both. On one hand, and that's why it's interesting that people cannot figure out why we eat matzah. What is the metaphor of matzah? Some people say and at the Haggadah we say it's the bread of poverty. It's poor man's bread. There's no taste. There's no flavor. People say that the slaves ate it because the masters would give it to the slaves because it takes longer to digest, so it's better food for slaves. Doesn't taste any good, so it's a sign of slavery. On the other hand, matzah is a sign of freedom. Why? Because what it represents that we rushed out of slavery so fast that the bread didn't even have time to rise. So here you have, in some ways, to think about this. Matzah is the bread that captures both extremes. So if in the sandwich you have bitter herbs and you have the bitter and the sweet separate, in the matzah, both those themes come together as one. That's why it's the most spiritual food, because the matzah itself captures these. You're saying it's neutral. Yes, it's neutral. But I'm going to say a little bit different. Not that it's neutral, but it has both components. It's the unity of those opposing components, and that's what the matzah represents. That's a sort of a higher level of awareness that it's all one, right? As opposed to here, there's two separate things that become one. So matzah is the glue in a way. Yes, just like the wrap, the matzah holds it all together. So for the matzah to hold it all together, the matzah itself also has to have a sense of unity, not just unity, but really, really incorporation of opposites. Right?
Before you exit while you're still asleep.
Yeah, that's another point. This is all in your head. Yeah.
It tastes and the freedom to actually go either way.
Yes. That's up to you. Yes, the freedom is very much up to you. There's external freedom that's not up to you, but the internal freedom is up to you. Yeah, this is beautiful stuff. Thank you all for joining us.
I'll tell you a really quick story. When my son was in China, he was doing a Seder, and he tried, and he needed the bitter herb.
Yeah,
he couldn't get horseradish, so he got wasabi. Took a big bite of it at the Seder, and literally passed out. So no, but that's.
Yeah, I once passed out at Seder, 4 cups of wine. After 2 of them, I passed out. So yeah, it's very intense. It's a very intense culinary experience.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you.
Thank you to all.
Thank you. Be well.